Please subscribe to help you and your motorcycle perform better.
Dave Williams, bookbinder, here with today's video. Your suspension setup must match your pace.
Unless you can prove to me you can ride at track speed, you get a street setup.
You've often heard Dave talk about never leaving the bike behind you.
And as we all get better, we keep pushing our forks and shocks to work harder. So in that situation, we are going to be okay for today, that race, that event. But something needs to change, because if you don't, you're leaving the bike behind you.
As you up your pace, your suspension setup must also change to match that pace. Dave illustrates the general principle with his coaching bike.
So when you go to a school, obviously you're going to learn how to ride. That should improve your skills in certain aspects. That improvement should allow you to get better, which means you accelerate harder, you brake harder, and things improve. Now, can your bike keep up with that? So what we did was run the setup as I'm learning this bike and putting my own setup in it to cope with my ability. Then I went out and coached with a rider that's new. So the pace was significantly different. Previous tire wear was flawless. Now going slower, the shock isn't under anywhere near as much load. The tire doesn't get anywhere near as hot. So tire temperature is a problem right through here. All the tire wear is exceedingly rough. And then on top of that, we get these beautiful shiny patches right here on every single tread. And the leading edge is completely rounded off on each one of these. So what does that mean? It means the tire pressure was too high, the shock was too stiff in terms of preload, and the compression dampening was too stiff. So the shock is working in the upper third of its range, which is not optimal for this setup. So as you improve, your setup must stay ahead of your skill. If it doesn't, look what happens. In this case, I'm accelerating tire wear with a setup that's too stiff given the pace I was running. Could we go backwards and fix it? Of course. But we're learning the bike and we're moving forwards. So in reverse, we proved how an inferior setup can accelerate tire wear, give you adverse warnings and show you with tire wear what's wrong, and then additionally give you that thing to think about, which is tire temperature. So in riding the bike at pace and putting the suspension under the appropriate level of duress, which the setup is there for, all the triangles we had through this portion here and here are completely gone. So now we're riding at a pace where the suspension and the tire are working in perfect harmony together, and with these rubber balls, tire temperature is also exactly right. So make sure your setup can support the riding, the pace, the lean that you're doing.
Obviously, the faster your pace, the narrower is your setup window. The slower your pace, the broader is your setup window. So let's see how that plays out elsewhere in the world, and we'll start with the pros, and then we'll work backwards, we'll work down to us mortals. In this first clip, Neil Hodgson explains what it's like at the sharp end when it's more than setup.
The way I see it at Yamaha, we know there's a lot of tension in that garage. Viñales is saying, I want the bike designing around me. If he finishes in front of Valentino Rossi in the championship tomorrow, he can bang that drum with 10 times more force, saying, what are you doing? Make this bike for me.
In this clip, Mr. Vermeulen is at a race, and it's damp, sketchy conditions. It's not full wet. There are damp patches around, so the pace is slowed. And he's being asked about what it's like to ride in those conditions.
Well, they're the best motorbikes in the world. They're the fastest when everything is working in the range it should be working. When you go out there and you go 3 seconds slower because the conditions are damp or patchy, they're really hard to ride. They don't feel nice. The electronics don't work well. Well, they didn't in my day. Tires don't grip. You know, suspension doesn't get loaded. And when it's like this and you're changing from wets to dries, and to make the right decision and get on the right equipment at the right time to put the best lap, it's a lot of pressure, not only for the riders but all the crew as well.
That was from a couple of years ago, and now here's a recent example from winter testing. This is Hervé Poncherel in a Crash.net interview. Crash.net, awesome site. Blows up the phone though, man. In their interview with Hervé, he explains this regarding the KTM. Quote, both Johan and Hafiz are very happy with the KTM engine, and almost every run you could see they were more at home with the bike. We had only one bike per rider, and you lose track time. Also because the team is still discovering this bike, so every change takes longer. Now here's the nut. But you don't want to keep doing runs once you've reached the limit of a setting. You need to change the setup to understand how it feels for the rider. Let me read that again. But you don't want to keep doing runs once you've reached the limit of a setting. That's what they experience, and you can experience that too. Even us mortals can reach the limit of a setting, as you'll see with this rider on his MT-10.
Nope, that's maximum. All right, so you're all out of preload now.
Okay, so it's all maxed out.
So at this point, it's essential that you get non-progressive springs, right? All we're doing when we have preload on a progressive spring is basically trying to take the soft piece out.
Sure.
So given your weight and your ability, some 105 kilogram springs will be ideal for you.
105 kilograms.
But if you don't fix the shock first, you're going to end up like that.
Yeah.
So the other piece of the puzzle then becomes, what can you afford when?
Right.
And the shock is by far the biggest priority.
The primary. Okay.
By far.
All right.
But if you bottom again,
No.
you are better than it. So you need to brake earlier and lighter so you don't low side. Because your ability plus weight is better than the front end can support it.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you're going to have to back it out of braking and work on mid-corner speed instead.
Okay.
Or rhythm and flow of how little brakes you really do need versus what you think you need.
As opposed to just firing it at the corner and then
Yes.
braking.
So a little more finesse this afternoon may be mandatory.
Sounds like it. This is my third full track day.
Okay. Get your butts in.
First one on this bike though.
Okay.
Now his street pace is likely too slow for the setting that Dave's plugged in over a number of sessions at the track. This is why Dave often gives people street settings and track settings when they bring their street bikes to the track. But I guarantee you, his street pace will be faster after that track day. Let's look at another example with a Ducati 959.
All right. Bottomed out. Yeah. Nice work. So even in one session, you bottomed out.
It didn't feel like it bottomed out.
Well, it won't. When you get right down to the bottom, it really slows the inertia down, but when you get back to your pits, you'll see this much is dirty at the bottom. Everything else is clean.
Oh, so, yeah.
So you can see exactly where it went to. So we'll see what the rear tire comes in next session.
Okay.
And see how the whole bike's working together, but we've got to keep you off bottom.
He just got faster with every session, and Moss had to continue to add preload to the point where the guy really is going to need to change springs, just like the guy on the MT-10. He did manage to finish his track day with the springs he had, but if he decides to go any faster, it's going to be tough. Moss also addresses this in an upcoming diagnosis video, Running Wide on Corner Exit, where he talks about once you run out of adjustment, start working on something else. Even us mortals can override our suspension setup and our suspension componentry. Was the whole point of suspension myth number 1. Obviously, people ride junky suspension all the time. In fact, before adjustable suspension, back in the day, we all rode junky suspension. So it can be done. In today's world, do you want to? Do you have to? No. Is it best to? No. Is it safe to? No. Why take all that risk when today you can adjust your suspension to give you a better setup? That saves tires, tire wear, saves fairing wear, and even saves lives. Go faster, and go faster safer with the appropriate suspension setup. That's the whole point of this YouTube channel and Dave's website, to teach these principles so that you can put the proper setup in your bike your own self.